Welcome to another edition of Shelf Life Book Reviews Online. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to my Shelf Book Reviews YouTube channel. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, please add this to your favorites list and please send the link to your friends as well too. As usual, I'm bringing to your attention two very highly recommended books. They are nonfiction and hopefully you will add them to your reading lists. The first book is The Weight of Sand. My 450 Days Held Hostage in the Sahara by Edith Blais. This is published by Greystone and it retails for $34.95. This is a truly amazing book about a young woman, Edith Blais, who went for a vacation in West Africa. She was considering volunteer work there, and while she was there, she met a young man by the name of Luca Tacchetto. He was from Italy, and he was there to consider doing, perhaps volunteer work as well. So they became good friends, and they traveled together. They were not acquainted with one another before the vacation, and so as they went there, they suddenly found out that they were sort of isolated, and a group, which were jihadists, came and they abducted them. Now, was the bottom line that they were going to be held for ransom? There was really no ransom demands made, but they took them and they held them secretly, and they went from place to place. And it became rather precarious because they didn't know the outcome, whether they were going to be killed or just what was happening. They went across the Sahara Desert under extreme heat, extremely horrible conditions, and at one time the pair refused to eat any food. They simply had liquid like water, but it was very sparingly too. They didn't give them a lot of water to begin with. So it is told in very gritty terms. Edith Blais, she also adds a lot of poems that she wrote while she was in captivity. At one point, the pair were separated. It seemed he might be going back to Italy, and she was kept with her abductors. Now, at no time was she sexually abused. At no time really did she feel that it might come to that one day. She was away from Luca for quite a few days till they came back together again. They reunited them, and in the camps that they stayed at, it was very horrible conditions, really. They had very little water. They didn't really get a chance to bathe. They were close to some streams, but there was not a lot of water. The food was not something that they really enjoyed. So as the time wore on, after a year and longer, they finally actually got to the stage where they thought they had to make a break for it. It was about 450 days that they had been captives with their abductors, and actually during the book, Edith gives some of her captors nicknames. Like, she never says their real names, but she has names like Eyeglasses, Groundhog, Crazy Eyes, the Rooster, and more. They were the defining characteristics by the nicknames. And one night, they decided in the middle of the night that they were going to make a break for it. There was a full moon, and they only had the light of the moon. They really didn't know how far they were from any form of civilization. And so they made a break in the middle of the night, barely after midnight, and they actually got to a road, and a man picked them up, and they were in the back of the truck, and one of the abductors was obviously looking for them, and he asked the man in the truck whether he'd seen anybody. Now, the man in the truck really saved their lives by lying. So eventually they made it to the U.S. Embassy, and they were free. Finally, they flew home. They parted ways. Edith went back to Canada, and Luca went back to Italy. So they do have a happy ending. It is a very harrowing experience, and Edith tells it in very graphic detail, and she takes you right to where she was, right to the desert. You can feel the heat, you can feel the frustration, but this is definitely, the weight of sand is really a most impressive work. The second book of note is The Dressmakers of Auschwitz, the true story of the women who sewed to survive. This was written by Lucy Adlington, and it's published by Harper, and it retails for $21.99. This looks back at the concentration camps that were in Auschwitz during the Second World War. This was in, well, actually, this takes place at the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. And what the story is about are 25 women who were forced to sew to survive. The wives of the Nazi officers were very vain, and they always wanted to look their best. They wanted the best clothes. And they had these 25 women in the concentration camp who sewed these very elite garments so the women could look good. Basically, if these women did not sew clothes, they might end up in the gas chamber. So the book looks at several of the women. One of the women is Braca Kohat. She was one of those people who sewed clothes to survive. And actually, the author, Lucy Adlington, who is a fashion historian, spoke to her. Braca unfortunately died in 2021, but actually she was 100 years old. So she lived quite the life, and she was the last survivor of the 25. She also spoke to Marta Fuchs, who was a trained cutter, and she assembled many of her Jewish friends, to work in the concentration camps so they would be spared the gas chamber. And they made these fine garments for all the women of the officers. Now, one of the women who was the head of the camp, her name was Hedwig Haas, and she actually was part of the main group where all these clothes were made. Her husband was Rudolf Haas, and he was the head of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. So the story really is, it's difficult to read at times. It tells you graphically about those who were sent to the camp. The conditions there were actually horrifying. The women who were sewing were often covered in lice. They were deloused. They were given very little food. Although they made such elegant clothes, they basically wore rags. And it is a very in-depth look at a lesser-known aspect from the Second World War. We thought we'd heard it all about the Second World War, about the various camps, and all the horrible things that went on. Well, this is a much different look at a facet of the Second World War. And The Dressmakers of Auschwitz is really a unique tale. If you're a war historian, or if you like historical nonfiction, this book is definitely one that you should add to your reading list. So those are the two books I wanted to bring to your attention. Hopefully you will, when you go to the store, you will seek them out. And as always, I welcome your comments, positive and negative, and I thank you for watching my Shelf Life book review video. So until we meet again, stay safe, stay sane, stay social distancing, and do stay in touch. Thanks again, and bye for now.